Casuals will tell you that there isn't very many marquee games this week, but what if I told you that there's actually going to be some diamonds in the rough here in week number one? Welcome back to the Any Given Saturday podcast, your hopeful home of college football content as we move through this college football season. We got a lot going on in tonight's podcast. As I mentioned before, we may have some marquee games, but there's some diamonds in the rough that I want to bring to your attention because not very many people may be talking about it, but there might be some implications in these other games in terms of AP top 25 implications. So lots going on in tonight's podcast, as you guys will probably see this on Friday. So I know we're going to have some college football games on that particular night, but just think about that as the calm before the storm, to say the least, right? So very excited about tonight's podcast, and I hope you guys are excited for it as well. If you are, make sure you go ahead, smack that like button for me. That helps me out tremendously with the YouTube algorithm. Every creator and their mama talks about how just brutal the YouTube algorithm can be at times. You could help me out a little bit here tonight by smacking that like button. And then there's a lot of you guys that are not subscribed to the show, but at the same time, you guys are tuning in though. So I don't want to pull out the big fancy graph that shows the subscribes and unsubscribes amount. Don't let me be that guy. You can help me not be that guy by hitting that subscribe button as well, if you do happen to be brand new to the channel as well. And with that being said, like I mentioned before, we have a lot to cover tonight. So reason why I say that we got a lot to cover tonight, I mentioned those diamonds in the rough multiple times already, and I'm pretty sure we know by now what those mainstream marquee games are going to be. Obviously, LSU and Florida State, that's the biggest one, and we're going to lead off with that here tonight. But there's some other games I want to bring to your attention as well, besides the North Carolina-South Carolina game that's happening in Charlotte as a neutral site game. Besides possibly Clemson and Duke. Duke getting AP top 25 consideration. They're not in the AP poll officially, but they are receiving votes. So Duke is getting some respect here in the preseason. And that game is at home, by the way, for the Duke Blue Devils. So potential trap game for Clemson. Is it that one of those situations? We'll dive into that. But you want to talk about some diamonds in rough, like serious diamonds in the rough. There, besides what I just mentioned, there's 3 other games. I'm talking about 3 other games right now that no one is really talking about necessarily, but 2 teams, but both of the teams that would go up against each other in these 3 other games, they're both receiving votes in the top 25. So sneaky good games, and we're definitely going to go over it here tonight. So let's not waste any more time. Got so much to cover. I'm even going to show you guys my Wendy's 4 for 4 special. We're going to complete that here tonight as well. But let's go ahead and dive right into it because we already know what time it is. We know what the biggest game of the season is going to be. And this is a rarity, a game in week number 1 where we do end up seeing college football implications on the lines in terms of the playoff. 14 playoff last year of that era coming up. We got number 5 LSU taking on the number 8 Florida State Seminoles. Should be a big time game on the docket. And this was truly an exciting game that we had the chance to watch last season. This was, of course, a game in which we saw it go literally to the very last play. LSU actually missed an extra point in order for Florida State to win that game. It was a big-time win, and it shows that Mike Norvell maybe actually knows what he's doing, dare I say it, at Florida State. This is certainly going to be the best team that he's had since he's been on that Florida State campus as the head coach. But now here we are. This game certainly one of the more exciting games of the week, and this is a game that could go either way. You see the spread that's being reported by Vegas right now, and then you see our power rating model here on Any Given Saturday. And for the first time, I think, since we started this podcast, right on the nose, the power rating and Vegas do agree. So it's at -2.5 in favor of LSU. Now, what does that mean? This means this game really could go either way. So how I want to do it for this game, as well as jumping into the other games moving forward into this pod, kind of want to talk about the keys of the game first and foremost. How does LSU win? How does Florida State win? And then maybe give my prediction in terms of what I think could happen in this game, right? So we'll go right into it. We will jump right into the keys of the game. And for multiple keys happening here, right? So first and foremost, running the football is extremely important for both teams. So both teams, the key to winning this game is being able to run effectively. And LSU, for the most part, was effective in running the football. They ended up going 10-1 last year, and a big reason why they did that was because they went over 140 yards on the ground in those games. So when they do accomplish that, which they did end up doing most of the time, they end up winning the game. They won 10-1. Now, in their other 3 games, and that does include the SEC Championship against Georgia last season, they went 0-3. And this is a pattern for Brian Kelly's teams, even if you want to take it back to when he was at Notre Dame. For example, in 2021, Notre Dame teams went 9-0 when running for 120 yards for more, 2-2 when they didn't. COVID year, Irish went undefeated when they ran for 140 yards on the ground like they did in 2022. That led them into the college football playoff. However, they went 1-2 when they didn't. That does include an ACC championship loss. Remember, for that 1 year, for that COVID year, Notre Dame was in the ACC conference. And of course, they also lost in the college football playoff. And then going to 2019, 11-0 when running the ball for 105 yards or more, 0-2 when they didn't. So I think you guys get the general idea, right? If LSU can run the ball, they're going to put themselves in a very good position to win this game. And Florida State is similar in that regard. Florida State really likes to run the ball themselves, and they were pretty effective in doing that too. So Florida State last season, they averaged 5.5 yards a game, and vice versa on the defensive end. They weren't too shabby at stopping the run either. They only allowed 4 yards a carry. So I'm really curious to see who's going to be able to move people off the ball a little bit more effectively in terms of that run game. I think whoever does end up getting the run game going first, not saying that they would win outright, but I do think that it is certainly possible that we could absolutely see them have an advantage in terms of winning this game. Now, of course, running the football, not the only thing that's important. I think we all know that running the football matters. I think we're all on the same page there. So, what are the other keys that we should be watching for when we come into this game? Second thing that I want to watch out for, special teams. I think special teams in a game where it could really go either way. Usually special teams doesn't have a big impact on the game, but I think special teams will certainly be amplified in this particular game. I think this is going to be one of the closer games that we do end up seeing. And that being considered, I do think that for LSU, they had some issues with their special teams last season. Going back, not even worried about the kicker, missing that extra point against Florida State. Also had that block kick against Georgia. That ended up getting returned for a touchdown. That alone is a 10-point swing. You hate to see that. But you just take a look at the punt return average. For their opponents, LSU allowed 11 yards per punt return, while LSU was able to get just 3.5 yards at best. So not getting a lot out of their special teams. Special teams certainly needs to be better for the LSU Tigers going into this year. Florida State's special teams, I think it's fine, but you never know what can happen when you have 18 to 22-year-old kids on the field lined up against each other. So we do know this as well. And then finally, how well does Jaden Daniels end up getting protected in this project? Well, I guess there's another key, but we'll go to the LSU side first. How well does Jaden Daniels get protected in this game? Last year, LSU's offensive line allowed 45 sacks. That is a tremendous amount for, the type of talent that LSU may have on this team. Will Campbell, certainly one of the best players on that team at offensive tackle. He's a true sophomore, by the way. That kid is going to be special. But I have questions about that offensive line, though. How does it hold up, particularly against Florida State's pass rush? Florida State got a pretty good pass rush, I would say. 40 sacks last year. That's more than 3 sacks a game. So how's that pass rush? Do they get home against LSU? Or is Jaden Daniels, who is a mobile quarterback, to be fair, so he's not a statue, so that helps. But if it's one of those games where Jaden Daniels is going to be running for his life, could be a long night for the LSU offense, because what that could happen in order to avoid your quarterback taking more hits, maybe they do become a little bit more one-dimensional, and Florida State, they're not too shabby at stopping the run as well. However, let's say that defensive line does not get home Sunday night against LSU's offensive front. So what happens then? One thing that I'm very cautious about is Florida State's ability to deal with an accurate quarterback. Now, over the course, and going back to 2016 as well, Florida State's defense has improved tremendously. They are at one point ranked 117th in the FBS, and they got that all the way up to 15th last year. It's been a long rebuild in terms of the culture on the defensive side of the ball. They're terrific again on defense again, and that's mainly because of their ability to stop the run. However, one thing that I do want to caution for, though, is if they come across a quarterback that is able to effectively get his receivers open. So Florida State did end up losing 3 games last year. In 2 of those 3 losses, Clemson and Wake Forest, those were 2 of those losses. They beat Florida State by their respective quarterbacks, DJU and Sam Hartman as well. They both completed 65% or more of their throws. DJU now at Oregon State, so we don't have to worry about that this time around. Although they might have a better quarterback. That's to be determined, right? LSU almost pulled it off last year, and Jaden Daniels was very efficient with the football too. He completed 71% of his passes last year in that game. And if it went to overtime, I would contest with the way that momentum was swinging. I think LSU would have won that game in overtime. Not saying it for certain, but it certainly can happen, right? So that's a thing that I'm watching for as well. How does Florida State secondary hold up? Same thing for LSU's, because LSU has a bunch of transfers that are going to be asked to step up and play in this game. And it's a high marquee test for that LSU secondary early on. So I think we all understand that. So what's going to happen in this game? How do I think this game is going to turn out? Like I said, I think it's going to be one of the most exciting games that we'll see in non-conference play this year. I think Texas and Alabama, that's going to be played next week. That's certainly up there as well. But in this game right here, both sides are going to be loaded with NFL talent on both sides of the ball. We know LSU is getting deeper. Florida State is also getting deeper as well. They're not at that 50% blue chip ratio to win a national championship. I still think they're a year away from that, but they're deeper than they were last year. And last year was a really exciting game. It really comes down to who is going to hold up better in the trenches. It comes down to those trenches. Whoever wins in the trenches for more points of the game, that's who the win is going to be. Now, I didn't talk about the LSU defensive front. And I think that defensive front can be a difference maker. Be one of those teams that maybe gets get into the 4th quarter. It's tough, hard-nosed football. It's a tight game. Could a couple of giant stops could maybe be the difference in this one? I'm thinking LSU narrowly, but I think these are two teams that are more than capable of winning their conference. As in my prediction videos for the conference championships going in, I have LSU winning the SEC, and I have Florida State winning the ACC out in the in this college football season. Florida State in particular, I think, is capable of winning the college football playoff. It's going to be fun. I'm excited to watch this. It's going to be must-see TV. Hopefully, I see you guys watching with me as well. But I think Florida State narrowly wins this one. Narrowly. So even though that is technically the only top 25 matchup that we have this week, but even though we may only have one top 25 matchup in this entire week 1 weekend, I still think that we got some great games happening on our hands. I really do. And I think what we're gonna see here. Well, let's jump right into this next game. No, it's not a great segue, but it is what it is. So South Carolina and North Carolina, they are going to meet up. It's not in North Carolina Stadium. It's not going to be in South Carolina Stadium as well. They're actually going to Bank of America Stadium, hosts of the Carolina Panthers, an NFL team. They'll be meeting up in Charlotte, North Carolina to get together and play in this particular game. Oh, this is going to be fun. We got a premium quarterback matchup to get things going. We got Drake May. Some will say, well, it's maybe a consensus number 2 quarterback in the upcoming NFL draft in 2024. And then we also have on the other side of the coin, we have Spencer Rattler, who didn't perform up to expectations at Oklahoma. He ended up being benched for Caleb Williams, but then he transferred here to South Carolina, and he's starting to find his footing a little bit. He really found himself late in the year, and that was a big thing about South Carolina's surge. Spencer Rattler was playing simply at a higher level. Now, this is also 2 teams where programs are going in different directions. North Carolina lost, I believe it was 3 of their last 4 towards the end of the year, whereas South Carolina got big-time wins against Clemson, got big-time wins against Tennessee, and it was wins that Ohio State needed. So Ohio State was a huge supporter of South Carolina, sending South Carolina fans their flowers for helping Ohio State get into the playoff last year. But that's the point. The point is, even though this is not a top 25 matchup, they got to go and figure out how this is going to be a great game. We'll just say it how it is. It's going to be a great game. So what's the keys to this particular game? How is this game going to be determined? Because this is another close game, exciting game, according to both Vegas and the Any Given Saturday power rating model, which you can guys see down below. So first and foremost, we have to talk about the turnover margin. Turnovers are going to be key really in this particular game as well. So the defense, South Carolina was on that negative end in terms of the turnover margin last year. As great of a season as Frank Beamer had, Beamer ball has a lot to be excited about. That's one thing that they do have to get taken care of. They need to take care of the ball a little bit better. They ended up giving away the ball 27 times, and they only had 23 takeaways. And that's including the bowl game too. So less than 2 takeaways, and then they average more than 2 takeaways a game. So that's a big piece for this. And why that's really big for South Carolina in particular, they were 7-1 when they won the turnover battle, or when they were at least even. when they were on the losing side of the turnover battle, they went 1-4. They did end up going 1-4 in the turnover battle. So that's a big thing to watch. How good does Spencer Rattler does not have to outduel Drake May. I think that's an unrealistic expectation. And I think most of you would agree with that assessment, that Spencer Rattler does not have to outduel Drake May convincingly in order to win this game. There is a scenario where Drake May plays better than Spencer Rattler, and South Carolina can still win the game. Speaking of Drake May last year, Drake May has to be able to handle pass rush. So one big reason why North Carolina had that late season slump was what teams figured out last year is when they were able to get to Drake May, the North Carolina offense just slugged to a crawl. It was not the same North Carolina offense that we saw in the beginning of the season. But when Drake May has time, we know that he can cook. When Drake May was hitting 63% or more on his throws, and that was most of the time, they were undefeated. They went 9-0, and a team that was low-key in the hunt to go to the college football playoff. But then when he wasn't doing that, and this happened a lot late in the season, they went 0-5 in that regard. And a big reason for that was, so for example, in the Georgia Tech game, one of those late season losses that really hurt them, they allowed a season high 6 sacks against the Tar Heels, who allowed 11 combined sacks. Their other 4 losses too. So even take out that Georgia Tech game, Drake May was getting hit a lot. That offensive line needs to give Drake May time. And South Carolina's not going to make that easy either. South Carolina, as many problems that South Carolina's defense has had, they only allowed the opposing quarterback to hit the 60% passing mark only 3 separate times. So that's another thing to really watch out for in this game. How effective specifically is Drake May? Because again, I mentioned it earlier, Spencer Rattler could lose statistically to Drake May and South Carolina can still win. But North Carolina, I don't think, has that same luxury. I think Drake May has to cook in order to come out of Charlotte, North Carolina 1-0. Now, other things to watch out for. Does North Carolina try to test that run defense as well? South Carolina did allow 198 yards per game. I know you got Drake May, but I think one thing that you can do possibly in order to slow down South Carolina's pass rush, in order to guarantee more time for your first round pick quarterback, at least as of today, is having a balanced offense. Attack that running game. If North Carolina can do that, I think that could be very good. That could be very, very good. So that's the big keys in this one that I really wanted to highlight going into this game. Also, North Carolina does have a pretty good special teams unit. They knew how to get big plays in special teams. Punt return average for North Carolina was over 13 yards an attempt. So that's going to be something to watch out for too. But at the end of the day, I think we know what's going to happen here. I think we know this is going to be fun. And I think we're going to see some points put up on the board. I think the scoreboard operator is going to have some sore fingers, changing that scoreboard consistently. And I think it's going to be a close battle all day long. But because I think South Carolina has less margin of error, yes, North Carolina is ranked and not the South Carolina Gamecocks. Yes, North Carolina is a favorite according to Vegas. I think South Carolina gets it done. I actually think they win this game, but it's going to be close. It's going to be fun. And it's going to be, most importantly, absolutely electric. I can't wait for that particular game on Saturday night. Lots of good games. Man, I just thinking about it makes me so excited. If you're not like all that excited about this college football weekend because there's only one marquee matchup, according to the casuals, this ain't for you, boss. I need you to go to your doctor, check to see if you have a pulse. Because we have even more games coming up in terms of those mainstream market games. And this one is happening on Labor Day. So everybody and their mama going to be off. And also, unlike those other two games that we finished talking about, this game is actually happening at a college campus. Clemson coming in as a top 10 team in their own rights. They will be going on the road to take on the Duke Blue Devils. And Duke is getting some love as well. Duke is a team not ranked in the top 25, but they are receiving AP top 25 poll vote consideration. Now, who knows if Duke actually gets into the top 25, because they actually do have a pretty difficult schedule by ACC standards, right? So that's something that I do definitely want to bring up. Now, that being considered, this could be a sneaky good game as well. I mentioned it in the intro. Could this be a possible trap game for Clemson? Because Clemson will certainly have bigger fish to fry as the season progresses, right? They'll have Florida State in the regular season. They will also play against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Notre Dame got their number last year as well. South Carolina as well. We have them, while they're not an AP top 25 team, we do have them power rated as a top 25 squad themselves. So Clemson's going to have more difficult games. And this is also a conference game. Keep in mind, this is also a conference game. So conference games, you never know what can happen in these conference games. Seems like there's a little bit more parity than maybe in your non-conference games. There's less upsets in the non-conference season, in my opinion. Now, Clemson has had their number as of late. They have won 5 in a row against the Duke Blue Devils, and they have also won 10 of their last 11, with the last time Duke beating Clemson all the way back in 2004. So it was almost 20 years ago, the last time that this happens. Now, let's go ahead, as we've done for the first couple of games already. What are the keys to this particular game? So, for starters, I think what's really important is Clemson needs to be able to stop the run. Yes, I know Duke is probably what you don't think about in terms of being that good running team, per se. But Clemson, we know that they have a really darn good run defense. And this is a time in college football where no matter how good your secondary is, every once in a while, there's going to be a team that's going to have 300 yards or more passing. And the South Carolina game aside, one thing that Clemson was really good at on the defensive side of the ball was being able to stop the run. The South Carolina game was different, but in every other game, they were a team that shut down the run pretty well. Now, at the same time, they did allow 200 rushing yards twice. They lost to Notre Dame, and they almost lost to Florida State too. Tennessee ran it for 124 yards, but Tennessee couldn't do anything offensively through the air. Now, even if they do stop the run, Clemson is not invincible. In that South Carolina game, they won by throwing the ball straight up and down. They did not rely on the running game. So if Duke is going to be able to pull this win off, they're going to have to be able to have that South Carolina type of game. Run the ball decently enough, be in that 4-yard per carry range. Not great, but keep Clemson honest, right? That's how Duke could possibly win this game. It also matters how they start as well. So Clemson is one of the best teams in terms of starting out well. If you want to take a look at Clemson's first quarter scoring, Clemson won 110-48. That's in first quarters throughout the Clemson Tiger football season. So if Clemson is able to get those types of starts, they can maybe build some ground between them and Duke, and Duke never gets within a possession after the first quarter. It could happen. We also know that Clemson was pretty good at getting to the quarterback last year. They ended up with 44 sacks last year. Well, on the other end, their offensive line was all right, allowed 28 sacks. Cool. But what about Duke? How does Duke pull this upset off? Well, few things. First, we talked about keep Clemson in striking distance. Survive Clemson's toughest punch in the first quarter. If you can survive Clemson's toughest punch in the first quarter, I think you can give yourself a shot for sure. Time possession could also be important as well. Duke, on average, had the ball for 33 minutes a game, while their opponents less than 27 minutes. So Duke winning the time possession is going to be real critical in terms of winning this game. Put together some methodical drives and maybe limit the possessions that Clemson gets in this game, because Clemson, they certainly have a couple of playmakers. Cade Klubnik, for example, Will Shipley to go with that as well. They got some playmakers there on the offensive side of the ball. And then finally for Duke, be able to rise to the occasion in that second half. Ride that home field advantage. Duke's fourth quarter scoring, for example, they scored 133 points throughout the season in the fourth quarter. So if it's close going into the fourth, watch out. Because home field advantage, and in these games where the longer that it's close, the longer that you do end up seeing the underdog starting to believe that, hey, we can really do this. And it's going to be rocking in that particular stadium, because it is going to be such a marquee game for Duke. For Duke, this is their Super Bowl. Let's make it very clear. This is Duke's Super Bowl right here, right now. So, at the end of the day, what are we looking at in terms of a spread? So, Clemson is at minus 12.5. That's as of August 31st. That's when I'm recording this podcast. And according to the power ratings that are put forth, that we put together here, they are currently sitting at a minus 16.5. That's where they currently are, according to the Any Given Saturday power model. And as much as I talk about how good Duke could possibly pull this off, I also generally agree with how Clemson is going to handle this game. I think that this is going to be the type of game where the talent on Clemson's roster is going to show as we progress into this game longer and longer and longer. And while I remember watching spring ball with Duke, and Duke, don't get me wrong, has plenty of upside in terms of his season. They got some veterans. Wasn't all that impressed with their spring game in terms of the talent level. I don't know if they rise to the occasion here tonight. Duke could be a team that does get better as the season goes on. But in terms of Monday night, I do think Clemson wins this game. And, we'll see what Duke is made of. But I don't expect Duke to win. But should be an interesting game. to see how Cade Klubnik's first start of 2023 goes, as he was the guy that pushed DJU out the door. It's going to be an interesting storyline to certainly watch out for. So, guys, that is all the big-time games. But remember when I told you guys? But there was more? But there was actually more on the way? Well, guys, I told you there was more than just those 3 games that have AP Top 25 implications. And when I tell you guys this next game in particular, this game is happening at 7:30 on Saturday night, I don't think you guys will believe me. Toledo going on the road against Illinois. Yes, I know. You don't need to go and get a Q-tip for your ears, guys. This is actually real. Toledo and Illinois. Yes, neither team is ranked in the top 25. I get it. I hear you. But what if I told you that both of these teams are receiving votes in the preseason top 25 to start the year? Who would have thought? Who would have thought 2023? It's been an interesting timeline, but here we are, barbecue on the titties. And Toledo is deserving of that special attention because Toledo, they come out, they are the defending champions of the MAC, and I actually do have them winning the MAC once again. But Illinois is no slouch either. Illinois, last year, they started out like 7-1. You know, a team that might have just ran out of gas towards the end of the year, but I think this is different than what's happening over in North Carolina. I think Brad Bulimia, I know I butchered that name, so you could roast me in the comments if you want. I think he's really turning things around there at Illinois, and Illinois actually produces a decent amount of football talent. It's a little bit of an underrated state when it's in terms of producing quality college football caliber players. Let's not forget that. So let's go jump right into this game. What are the keys in this one between Toledo and Illinois? So what we got going on for this Toledo-Illinois game? Right now, the game line is at 9.5, but the power rating model likes Illinois a lot more than maybe what Vegas does. It's got a 22.5 point game. I think the truth could be somewhere in the middle, but that doesn't mean I don't believe that there's a scenario in which Toledo wins this game. I wouldn't be surprised either if Toledo wins this game because the fact of the matter is Toledo is a quality football program, and they are led by their quarterback, Taquan Finn. He's a fifth-year senior who absolutely is, while he's not the most consistent, he does have those flashes of brilliance, but he also was a little too careless with the football at times. So that's one thing for Taquan Finn, aside from him being able to stay healthy. Now, if he is able to stay healthy and he is able to take care of the football, we're talking about elevating from a team that could win the MAC to a team that could be ranked in the top 25 of the college football playoff polls. That's what we're looking at with Toledo. Now, other things that could happen, you want to talk about some keys to the season. It's all about the turnovers. I already talked about it with Toledo earlier. Here's the thing, okay? Here's the thing with Toledo. All right, you guys are ready for it. I think I'm ready for it as well. How well do they take care of the football? How well do they do it? Because here's the thing. So if they give it up, if they turn the ball over 3 times or more, they're 0-4. Toledo does not win when they shoot themselves in the foot that many times. Even when it's just a couple of times, they went 1-5. That's where all of their losses come from. But when they take good care of the football, let's say it's just 1 turnover or no turnovers at all. It's a perfect day in that perspective. Toledo is 8-0. And under Coach Candle in his 9th year at the University of Toledo, during his tenure there, 21-3 when they don't turn the football over. That's a non-conference play. That's also in the MAC as well. So DeQuan Finn and how they execute on the offensive side of the ball, they can avoid those miscues. They can certainly give themselves a shot. They can give themselves a chance as well. Now, another thing about Toledo is, how do they start? Being an underdog on the road to, being able to start fast, that's important. Try to take the crowd out of the game. And Toledo started decently in this game. They scored 76 points in the first quarter, over 150 points in the second quarter. So if they can start out well, they can at least make this crowd a little bit more nervous, maybe take some of the crowd noise out of the game as well. So what else should we watch out for in this particular game? Well, what we could watch out for in this particular game, how's that young secondary going to hold up? It is a pretty young secondary, and what we already established, Toledo can throw the football. They got DeQuan Finn. They're more than capable of throwing this football around. That's also will be something to watch beyond this game. Next week, they'll go and play Kansas. They'll take on Jalen Daniels, who's a preseason Big 12 Player of the Year type of guy. So do guys like Drew Aller. He could be a big deal. So we know what the first 3 games are looking like for Illinois. How's that secondary hold up? Because Devin Witherspoon, he's not there anymore. He cannot be there to protect you anymore. He was a top 10 pick for a reason. Now, that being considered, when Illinois did do a good job of holding up against other quarterbacks, let's say they allow less than 200 yards. When they did that, Illinois was 8-1 last year. That's why they got all of their wins. But when they were getting cooked in the air, they were not winning games. It's that simple. They cannot get cooked through the air by DeQuan Finn. If DeQuan Finn is cooking them through the air, it's going to be an issue. It could be an issue. Now, how could we see this playing out? Now, Brett Bulimia, I don't know why I'm butchering his name, but I guess words are hard, right? Running the ball is going to be vital for Illinois. Illinois ran for 166 yards a game. They are very good at running the ball and stopping other teams from doing that as well. Less than 100 yards a game. Another thing too, penalties. Are they going to be more disciplined for penalties this year? Because last year they were called for nearly 800 yards of penalties. That is a significant amount for a team that has more of a ground and pound style. So because Illinois was a little bit more run heavy offensively, those penalties are amplified. And I think we saw that as well in that second half of the season last year. So that's another important matter. And then, of course, also for Illinois, starting fast helps. And they were good with starting fast. 82-32 being the score in the first quarter. If you look at all of the 13 games, I think, yes, 13 games that Illinois played last year. They were not in the Big Ten championship game. So here we go. What's going to happen in this particular game? This could be a game that it is possible for Illinois fans to sweat out. And here's the thing with DeQuan Finn and his ability to create explosive plays. It could even be a case where the game will seem like it's in hands, right? But then Toledo will have, those 1 or 2 drives critical in the game, throughout the game, that are going to be moments where, man, those could have been moments where Illinois really could have pulled away, but instead here they are. It could be tight late. My any given Saturday model says that it's going to be a 22.5 point win for Illinois, 22 to 23 points. I don't know if it's going to be that type of game. But that being said, I think Illinois gets it done. I don't know if they cover the spread, though. I don't know if I have enough confidence in that. But I'm intrigued by this game. And I'm also intrigued to see whoever wins this game, how much more respect they get in the AP poll. I think when I checked, see if I can pull it up here on ESPN right now. Okay, so Illinois is getting 3 votes. Toledo is getting 4 votes. What do either team get more respect depending on the outcome of the game? Like maybe not get ranked in the top 25, but maybe at least being that top 30, 35 range, because neither team is that. Should be a sneaky good game, though, even though it might not be as high octane as the other games that we previously talked about. So I had to take a little bit of a drink there. Gotta stay hydrated, guys. Gotta stay hydrated. Even if it's getting a little bit cooler, even if it's, one of those things where you do end up seeing temperatures drop just a little bit. But we featured a group of 5 team earlier today. Well, we just now featured a group of 5 team in Toledo. But what if we dive in to that group of 5 concept? Because up next, a game that I'm going to preview now, and this game is going to be happening at 8 p.m. Eastern, down in the Bayou. 2 teams that could be considered 2 of the best group of 5 teams in the country, potentially, when the dust settles, and 2 teams that are also receiving votes in the AP Top 25. Now, if you guys did end up guessing what this particular game is, you would be right in talking about South Alabama and also talking about Tulane. Yes, also getting top 25 consideration. Who would have thought about that? Tulane, in particular, ranked in the top 25 themselves. Ain't that something? They're ranked number 24 in the country, and they open up the season against this Tulane Green Wave team. Now, you see the lines once again on the screen. And Tulane is 6.5-point favorite by Vegas. Any given Saturday power model has Tulane minus 20. That's what I currently have as of right now here on Thursday night. However, what we always like to do, and what we have been doing for these first couple of games, is we'll go to the underdogs first. We'll talk about what South Alabama needs to do in order to win. And we'll talk a little bit about what Tulane would need to do as well on top of that. So let's not wait. Let's go ahead and do that now. Let's jump over to South Alabama, which, by the way, for those of you that have been watching this podcast for a little bit now, you're not surprised I'm a little bit on the high side on the South Alabama Jaguars. I actually do have them winning the Sun Belt this year. I think this is a tremendous team, a team that is a little bit underrated. Their over-under on the win total of the season is like 6.5 or something like that. I think they get more. I do think that could happen, but how does South Alabama pull this upset off? First and foremost, like we talked about with Toledo. No, not Toledo. With Illinois. My bad. South Alabama's got to chill out on the penalties. They really got to chill out. You thought Illinois was bad when I was talking about them in the previous game preview. South Alabama had nearly 1,000 yards of penalties last year. I had 101 penalties for 920 yards. Yeah, you got to chill with the penalties. That's going to really hurt you in a game like this. And if South Alabama does not reach their ceiling, that's going to be a big reason why is because of that, right? So South Alabama just has to play more disciplined football. Don't be stupid. Just don't be that guy. Because when they're not committing penalties, what we know that they can do is they can run the daylights out of this football. They had over 2,000 yards rushing last year, and then vice versa, not too shabby at stopping the run as well. They allowed 1,200 yards. So if we're doing math at home, kids, that's less than 100 yards a game that South Alabama allowed. But we also know what's happening at the other side, right? Tulane coming off one of the best seasons that a group of 5 team has had, 12-2, won also the American Conference. And now they might be, well, I don't have them winning the American. I think UTSA could give them a run for their money, but Tulane is still a good team. Maybe not the same team as last year, but still a pretty good team. They went and won the Cotton Bowl against USC, and we saw USC get a lot of love. Tulane did not get as much love, but I think Tulane is going to try to send a message here. They could try to send a message here. How does Tulane win this game? Well, for starters, Tulane wins with that discipline. They are the opposite of South Alabama. Tulane only committed 56 penalties all of last year, and that's through 14 games. So, what is that? Roughly 4 penalties a game. That went for 480 yards. So, literally half as many penalty yards as what South Alabama had last year, or at least roughly, give or take. It's also good if Tulane starts out extremely well. They could put South Alabama out, put them away early. Because Tulane, were very good last year at starting strong. They outscored opponents 113-37. They did do that in the first quarter alone. And that continuity could certainly be there, even though they lose a dynamic playmaker in Tajee Spears, who is now out in the NFL. He's gone. But Michael Pratt's not gone. He's still a dynamic quarterback. And it's just really going to come down to who controls the game better. Tulane will probably lean to its passing game just a little bit more than South Alabama. South Alabama will try to run the ball down your throat. So we'll see how that dynamic plays out in terms of who has more command of the game. Not necessarily referring directly to time of possession, but who has more command on the game in terms of dealing with those possible momentum shifts. Another thing that I also want to point out for Tulane is they got to get that pass rush going. And this defense should have a pretty good, strong starting 11. But even when they went 12-2 last year with an American Championship and also winning the Cotton Bowl, those third down stops weren't always there. But what we do know, though, secondary was pretty good last year for Tulane. Could be even nastier, based off of what I'm seeing off of like collegefootballnews.com. I'm not saying I'm an insider. I'm not an insider to these like fall camps for these various programs, but College Football News, that's really where I go to get a lot of good information. But that pass rush was a little inconsistent for Tulane, right? So Tulane did not get a sack in their regular season meeting versus UCF, for example, but in the American Championship, they ended up with 6 sacks. So there was a little bit of inconsistency in terms of pass rush. If they can get somewhere in the middle, get like 2 or 3 sacks, I think that'll be good. And as effective as South Alabama is running the football, if you could make them one-dimensional to where they're only effective with running the football, then that's going to give you an easier time stopping the run if they know that's the only thing where they're having remotely any type of success. So Tulane makes South Alabama one-dimensional. I think there's a good shot that Tulane wins this game. Now, speaking of who I think is going to win this game, I do want to say South Alabama has what it takes to pull this off. They actually should have beaten UCLA last year. They lost on the last second field goal. They lost 32-41. Painful loss. But South Alabama, remember, they're no slouch, guys. They're not a slouch. They won double-digit games last year, too. So Tulane has a lot of love in this game, but South Alabama, they are more than capable of going into New Orleans and pulling this game off. But Tulane, even though they don't have may not have the same explosiveness on offense, they'll still have a pretty good offensive line. Should be at least steady enough to have all those, Michael Pratt possibly take over in the second half. This is a game that could be a fight. And I mean, there's a big discrepancy between what the Vegas line is and the any given Saturday power model is. I think the truth is always somewhere in the middle when we see this kind of disparity between the Vegas line and what I had for the any given Saturday power model. I think this is a close game for the majority of this night game in the Bayou down in New Orleans. But I think Tulane could pull away late in the third quarter, in the fourth, and I think Tulane could win by a couple of touchdowns, but certainly keep an eye on South Alabama. They're going to be an intriguing team to watch this year. Like I said, I think it was in the Sun Belt prediction video. I think South Alabama could win the Sun Belt this year. And Tulane, while I'm not as high as them as I was last year, Tulane still, I think, is going to be a pretty good team as well. Keep an eye on both of these group of 5 teams as we progress through the rest of the season. Man, just the throat's dry, man. That tastes so. This tastes really good. This is the blackout berry flavor from Body Armor. Big Body Armor guy. No secret in what I'm drinking here tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Besides the secrets, though, it's no secret about UCLA. UCLA, we just finished talking about them, about how they nearly lost to South Alabama. But they didn't, though. They did indeed not lose to South Alabama. They will be playing against another Sun Belt opponent, though. And that Sun Belt opponent this year is Coastal Carolina. Coastal Carolina will be making the trip all the way across the beautiful United States, and they will be taking on UCLA in LA, in Pasadena, California, a little bit more accurately. 2 really good teams, both teams finishing with 9 wins last year. Coastal Carolina, however, does have a brand new coach, Tim Beck. And Tim Beck's going to have a task. Here's the thing with Coastal Carolina. They got to get that defense taken care of. It has to be taken care of. There's no secret that this defense did have its fair share of struggles last year. And UCLA, you could say, it certainly also had its fair share of struggles on the defensive side of football. Let's go ahead and jump into this. Keys of the game here between Coastal Carolina. The shot that clears, by the way, what a heck of a team name. And the UCLA Bruins. UCLA listed as a 14.5-point favorite, according to Vegas, as of Thursday night. Well, the any given Saturday power model has UCLA minus 29.5. So power model really high on UCLA, but has a lot of preseason data, though. We do have to keep that in mind as well. So what do we got going on in terms of keys of this particular game between Coastal Carolina and UCLA? So we know that UCLA can have those big explosive plays, and even though they're going to have a new quarterback, DTR, now with the Cleveland Browns, they got a true freshman at quarterback, Dante Moore. He's an X factor for this team. He could be really something here for UCLA this upcoming season. So to counteract that specific game. So what do we got going on? So for Coastal Carolina to stay in this game, what do they got to do? What do they got to do in order to get the job done. We know about their quarterback. Their quarterback's pretty darn good. Grayson McCall, who did answer the transfer portal, if you guys haven't noticed, but chose to come back to Coastal Carolina, even though he originally did enter in the transfer portal. That's a pretty big deal. You love to see it. But Coastal Carolina, if they're going to want to limit the offensive firepower that UCLA has on the other end, get that running game going. Get the running game going. Oh, and picking off some passes on defense, winning that turnover battle, wouldn't hurt them either. If you do those two things, good things are going to happen for the Chanticleers. Because last year, when Coastal Carolina actually did run for 150 yards or more, they were undefeated. They went 8-0. But they were 1-4 when they didn't. But I do want to keep in mind, this was mostly when Grayson McCall was hurt, because he is a dual threat quarterback. If you go back to 2021 and then in the COVID year, they only did that 2 times in the previous 2 years combined. So you want to talk about Coastal Carolina, talking about a sleeper team also to win the Sun Belt and see them return to being a team that win double-digit games once again. They could do that too. They certainly can do that as well. Now, other things. Coastal Carolina does have to do a better job of maintaining in the second half. That was one thing that did hurt them in those 4 losses. Coming out of the halftime locker room, they were not the best. They didn't have the best adjustments. Coastal Carolina was outscored by their opponents 57-112. So they were essentially doubled up in that regard. Now, like I said before, they do have a new head coach, Tim Beck. He's got an experienced quarterback too. So we'll see how Tim Beck does in terms of his ability to make halftime adjustments. I think that's one thing. That's really the biggest teller of third quarters, is how well do you make adjustments at halftime, and then late third quarter and then into the fourth quarter is making adjustments to what the other team is adjusting to, right? So watch for that. But I also talked about UCLA's quarterback, Dante Moore, true freshman. But he's also really highly raved by UCLA's guys. 4-star player coming out. They do also have the Kent State transfer, Colin Schlee, who could see some time. It's going to be interesting to see what UCLA does with their quarterback situation. I'm intrigued by that. But what's the keys to UCLA to ensure their victory? They gotta be on the right side of the turnover margin. I think that's extraordinarily important. They were not a team that was great with the turnover margin, right? So we started the season 6-0. When they did that, the only time that they lost a turnover battle was when they went against Bowling Green in their opener. They were -1. They still ended up winning 55-17. So also note, they were also lost the turnover battle against Oregon. And then in that second half of the season, they also only won the turnover margin once. And it was a win over Cal. So winning the turnover margin is going to be important because Coastal Carolina is not the same level as Bowling Green. I think we would all agree to that. I think that makes a lot of sense personally. But yeah, so that's going to be important to see them being able to do that. Yeah, that's really, if they can handle business with the turnovers and then Dante Moore turns out to be the guy, then maybe this becomes a more legitimate threat to win the Pac-12 as well. I have him as a dark horse to win the Pac-12. I wish this game was at at Coastal Carolina's field, though. I'd love to see that teal blue field. I think it's a really nice football field. In terms of how I think it's gonna go, listen, it's not like UCLA under Chip Kelly has been this rock against Group of 5 programs, and this has been well documented. They should have lost to South Alabama last year. They lost to Fresno State in 2018 and 21, and as well as against Cincinnati in that time period, and against San Diego State too. Coastal Carolina might not be as good as the Bearcats teams in 2021, the team that made it to the college football playoff. I think it is more than dangerous to pull it off. When you have an experienced quarterback with a high-octane offense, anything is possible. Really, the thing for Coastal Carolina is, can they get the key stops? Because UCLA is going to move this ball down the field. I think there's no other way to go about it. However, at the same time, if they can be a bend but don't break defense, this could be the case where UCLA could be put on upset alert. So I'm leaning towards UCLA to win this game. But if Coastal Carolina covers, I wouldn't be shocked by that at all. Even though the power rating model has this being a darn near 30-point win. A lot of preseason data. It's down on the Coastal defense. But it will be an interesting game as well. A game that maybe not as many of us will watch because it's a 10:30 start time out on the West Coast. I'll be up for it, though. I'll be up to watching it. We ain't going to miss out on this at all. So we went into the 4-for-4 special earlier this week. So in that 4-for-4 special, start things out, I talked about Thursday, the bet for Thursday, which, by the way, this kickoff is happening an hour and a half from now. And then also what's happening on Friday, too. So on Thursday, we talked about Florida and Utah. I think they hit the over, currently at 44.5. And then Miami, this actually changed. So it's now at minus 17 flat, not at 17.5. But what about Saturday? What's the best bet for Saturday, in my opinion? I actually think it's that Wisconsin game. They're taking on Buffalo this weekend. I think Luke Fickell is one heck of a coach, and Buffalo is in a rebuild. Buffalo is certainly in a rebuild. Listen, I know this number seems incredibly high, but I think this Wisconsin team they're still going to run the ball, but I don't think they're going to open up the offense a little bit more this season. So I know this number seems high. I absolutely get it if you don't want to take this bet, but I think Wisconsin's going to surprise some people with how much they open up this offense, and I think it's going to be a blowout against the Buffalo Bulls to start the season. And then what about Sunday? What about the Sunday-Monday games combined? You want to talk about those last 4 games of the college football weekend? I'm looking at Northwestern and Rutgers, but not looking at the lines. I'm looking at that over-under, specifically that under. This started out as a 40.5 over-under. It's down to 39.5, and yet I still think that they hit this under. These are two offenses that were not good at all last year, averaging less than 15 points a game. Do we really believe that either offense got significantly better? It's a conference game as well, and I think this has the potential of some Sickos committee thrown in there. For those of you that follow the Sickos committee on Twitter, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm going to smash this under here between Northwestern and Rutgers. But guys, that is going to wrap things up here in tonight's pod. I hope you guys had really enjoyed it. All the game previews happening. If you made it through this entire thing, guys, I appreciate you so much from the bottom of my heart. And you could add to my appreciation by hitting that like button. I truly would appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. And on top of that, if you're new and you made it through the whole pod, dude, hit that subscribe button as well for me, man. I would truly appreciate that too. It is time for me to sign off. The dogs really want me to take them outside, spend some quality time, which is exactly what I'm going to do before these Thursday night kickoffs happen. It's about 6:30 when I'm wrapping this up. So we've been at it for about an hour. And these college football games are starting soon. So I'm really excited for that. Hope you guys have a great weekend. I'll see you guys probably Monday morning with some game recaps. I'll probably record on Monday, have them up on Tuesday. It'll probably just be recaps because when I record the next pod, technically not all the games will be completed, so I'll hold off on the previews for a little bit. It'll be like we did this week with having 2 podcasts instead of the usual one because there's just so much to talk about. But that being said, guys, hope you guys have a good one. I am your host, Jake, and from here at any given Saturday, hope you guys have a wonderful Saturday for college football weekend and for all the other days. See you guys later. Take care.